Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session for the Cloud Data Architecture series. Today, we are going to discuss about the file validations that is required while we are ingesting data from some of the file sources, right? When we are building any data ecosystem or we are building any data platform like a data lake or a warehouse, we have to ingest data from multiple source systems, right? And these source systems can be a database, it can be files, it can be some APIs, it can be some streaming data, right? Today we are specifically going to talk about files. Like there are external source systems or maybe internal source system within your organization who are sending you files, and you need to ingest this data. So today's session is mainly around what kind of validations we need to implement when we are ingesting data from such files. Right? Again, it's going to be um, not focused on any particular tool. Okay, we are not going to talk about any specific tools like any of the AWS data services or anything in the Azure world. We are mainly going to discuss about the different validations that should be put in place, or the different design considerations while building such ingestion system. Okay, and this session is specific to the data validation, so the validations of these files. There are multiple validations which are required when we are getting a file. Okay, uh, to start with, I'll just summarize what kind of validations can be required. The first is header validation. Okay, and we'll go through all of these in details. Okay, the first is the header validation, where we need to validate whether the file is sending a header and if it's correct. There can be trailer validations to check the trailer records. There would be validations around the actual data records within that file. We can have some validations around the file naming conventions. We can have validations, so any technical validation to check the attributes in the data fields. We can have some business validations added. There can be validations for any missing files or duplicate files, or even whether the transmission is completed or not, right? So these are some of the basic validations, and we can keep on adding few more, but these are the bare minimums one that we should be adding while ingesting the data. This is mainly for the folks who are designing an ETL solution where they're extracting the data from such files, doing the transformations and validations, doing the required integrations and standardizations, and then loading the data either into a lake or a warehouse. Right? Similarly, there would be some validations required for the source if it's a database. But since it's being a database, it is more structured, it is more controlled. We don't need these kind of validations there, but we can discuss that in some of the other lectures. Okay, so let's start with the first one, right? I hope you are able to see the screen. So the first one is the header validation. Now, whenever a system sends a file, they generally add a header record. Okay, they generally add a header record in the file, and most of the times, this record would be the first record. Right? This record would be the first record in that file. It may happen that sometimes, right, this record is not the first record. There might be something else. They might add some, just other indicators as the first row. But most of the times, you'll find it as the first record. Now, how do you identify it's a header? So, what generally source systems do? They'll use the first character as an indicator. It might be marked at H, or it might be marked as S, or some of the systems might call it as a header itself, right? So you need to check based on the file specification system. You'll have to get the file specification system from your source system. Rather, not just for header, but all these validations, right? You will have to get the file specification from the source system, and based on that, you will have to put the validations. Now, if the file specification says the first record would be header and it would start always with H, then have a validation in place to check whether it is actually H as the first character, or whether if it's S as the actual character. Okay, again based on the file system. Then there are certain attributes that it will send. Now, I've just given an example here. Okay, it's not compulsory that you will get only these kind of attributes. There can be different attributes. but these are the most generic ones. Or in case you have to suggest the source system, right? What kind of a header you can, suggest the header based on these attributes. So first would be the identifier. Second would be the date. Okay. Now this would be the actual batch date for which the file is, right? So like this file is for 8th of Feb 2022. Okay. Now what happens is, right, sometimes you might get the files late. Okay, you might get the files after 2 days or 3 days, right? In those cases, it is important to know that this file is related to which date. Okay, this is not a file creation date. Okay, this is more of the batch date, or this attribute tells us that this file, the data in this file belongs to of which date from the source system. Okay, so this is the batch date. Then there can be a sequence. Okay, and this would be a running number. Let's say this sequence is here is S0001. So for the next time, right, next time when you get the file, it should be 0002. Now if these are daily files, you will get daily one file. There can be micro batches, right? In a day you might be getting a file every hour, so this sequence should increase. Okay, now there are some systems who would reset this sequence on daily basis, right? So that would be in combination of this. Like for 8 of Feb, this is the first sequence. Now there can be, then when they send the next file for 8 of Feb, it is sequence 2. And when we get a file for 9th of Feb, they may again reset this to sequence 1. Or some of the systems may use it as a running number irrespective of the dates, right? So this you have to clarify, you have to get the understanding based on the file specification system, and then put a validation in place. And the last column can be, it is related to which domain, right? The domain can be like customer, or it's for the sales. Okay, it is some orders data, right? It basically tells us the file belongs to which category. Okay, now what is the use of all these validations, right? Why are all these required, right? The main intention is to ensure that you are getting the right file. Okay, it can happen, right? Sometimes the source system sent you by mistake a wrong file. Okay, to give an example, suppose you are getting the file on daily basis, right? So you have already processed the file of 7th of Feb. Then you are about to process the file of 8th of Feb, but uh, due to some mistake at the source end, they sent you again the same file. Okay, so how would you know that it is the same file, right? Based on this date, or maybe based on the sequence. So all these things are required to validate you are processing the right file. Okay, so that's the purpose of doing all these validations. Fine. So for header validation is particularly to ensure that you have got the right file. Right. And this is for the header. You can also check sometimes, right? By mistake, you can get multiple headers, right? You may get two records starting with H, right? Even that is an issue. That means there is something wrong that has happened. So you can either raise a error or you can raise a warning, and of course you can process the file and check with the source system, right? But please check that there is at least one header available, right? If even a single header is not available, then you can straight away reject the file. Okay, and you will have to set that communication channel between the source system and your data teams, so that the communication is quick and you can actually get the replacement file within that time period. Okay, this was all about the header validation. Now let's move to the trailer validation, right? Trailer record, sometimes the source system would send this, some of the source system will not send it, right? So trailer record is similar to header. They can have an identifier which says, okay, it's a trailer. Okay, so some of the system may add it as T, some of them would add it at Z, some of them may say it is an end of file, something like this. And then they generally add some number. Okay, this, what is this number? This is the count of the records. Okay, count of the data records in the file. So if let's say if this number is 560, that means there can be one header record, one trailer record, and there would be some 560 data records. Okay, some of the source systems may include header and trailer also. Okay, again, this has to be clarified within the file specification system. Now why do you need this, right? You have to validate this number. You have to actually go and check whether this number with matches with the number of data records. How would you check that, right? It all depends on the tool that you are using. Let's say if you are using Unix, then you can, just do a line count, right? WC minus L kind of a thing by looking at the data records. If you're using some another tool, right, ETL tool, you can do it in that as well. But main thing is ensure that you have this validation in place. How that will help you, right? If this number does not match with the data records, right? If this number, the number in the trailer record does not match with the number of records in a file, that means there is some issue. Okay, there can be a transmission issue as well. There can be any issue, right? There can be an issue at the source end, that they had sent you half of the file, or they have sent the incorrect file, right? Or it can be a data loss during transmission. Okay, because source system is telling you that it is expecting 560 records to be in this file, but after transmission, right, the data records you just got like 200. That means some of the records have been missed in the transmission. So you can have a look at it and raise the errors accordingly, right? If you get this number, you raise an error. Again, you raise a error, and then since this is the number of records itself is missing, you can stop the processing. Now, whether you stop the processing or you continue the processing, it depends on your business use case, right? If your data records do not have any dependency, right? If they are not in they are not interdependent on each other, right? So even if you get 200 records, let's say you can process these, and the rest of the, right, 360 records, right? The remaining 360 records, if you later get it separately from the source system, maybe you can process this as separately. Now, this is only possible if there is no interdependency in the records. If that is the case, then you can still process this to, the initial 200 records. But if there is some dependency, then you cannot process, right? So whether you start the process, you continue, you abort, it all depends on your business use, right? Like header also, there might be some multiple trailers, which is again a problem, right? You can highlight that. So these are all data issues, right? You need to ensure a very clean file, right? Should have one header record, one trailer record, and multiple data records, right? Very basic thing. Okay. Now moving to the data records, right? We have seen the header, we have seen the trailer. This is the main thing, right? The main data record. So what all things you will have in the data record? Okay, or maybe an indicator which says it's a data record. Some of the files may not send the indicator also. Okay, when you don't get the indicator, right, that means it is a detail record, it's a data record, right? Even that is some of the standard that some of the systems use, right? So let's say for time being you have this as an indicator. So uh, how to check? You can skip the header record, you can skip the trailer record, rest all the things are, let's say, the data records, right? Now here you can have some validation in place, right? What is the total length of this record, right? Total length, there can be some limit, right? The source file spec could say, okay, this total length cannot go beyond certain characters, right? Let's say everything is a it's a file, everything is a char, let's say. So let's say the total cannot be more than 500 char. So you can have that kind of um, a validation in place. Second is you can have a validation on the number of attributes, right? In your file specs, you will get to know how many attributes are there, right? So this is the first attribute, second, third, four, and five. So you should check whether you have got the five attributes, in each and every record, right? Now, this is a time-consuming process. It's not all these validations are a must, but you can take a call, right? How much validations you want to do, right? How much accuracy you need, right? Now, some of the modern systems, right, or data lake and all, we just want to dump the data as is, right? There we don't really worry about whether there are any such issues or not. So again, depending on what we are trying to build, we can take a call. If it's an ETL system more from a warehousing perspective where you want a very clean data, then you can have these kind of a validation. Now here you can also have validations on the delimiter, right? See here I have used, this is the delimiter. Let's say this is a pipe, okay? Uh, I've used a pipe delimiter. It can be comma as well, right? So you can check whether, based on the delimiters, you can see if those number of attributes are there. Some of them files may send you tab delimiter, right? Some of them would have fixed with in the fixed column, right? There you will have to check the length of each and every column, whether it is as per the rule. Again, since this is a time consuming process, okay, you will have to see whether it is really required or not. Okay, but uh, The basic thumb rule would be, right, at least check whether the the number of data records are matching with the tailor records, right? At least the number of all the records have at least whatever attributes are there, right? If there are five attributes, it's a structured, properly structured data, you're expecting five attributes in all of them, then you can quickly write some even shell script that can help you to find out if there is any record which does not have these five attributes. Okay, that you can do. Uh, Moving to the next kind of validation is the file names, right? So far we have seen header, trailer, and the data validations or data record validations. File names is a very important validation, okay? Bare minimum, which has to be done even if you don't do other validations, at least the file naming convention, it should be there. Okay, if you're processing a file for, let's say, the customer and it has this naming convention, just check whether the file that you get is as per this. Okay, anyway, because this would be the identifier, right, to understand when you're doing a grep or you have file watchers to check this. It is based on this. Okay, you will check where the file naming convention is this. Okay, you should check the date, right? Now, this can be the creation date. This can be the creation date and time. Okay, in header, we had seen the batch date. Now this would be a creation date. Okay. Now, what's the difference in batch date and creation date? Okay. Let's say you got a file of 8th of Feb. Okay. But then from the source system, right, there was some delay, there was some issue. And that file you got on 10th of Feb. Okay. The file was created on 10th of Feb. So what will happen is, in this naming convention, you may have 10th of Feb. Okay, but inside the header, you will still have 8th of Feb because the file belongs to 8th of Feb. Okay. So this would be the batch, batch date, and this is the creation date. Okay. It can be vice versa also, right? It depends on the source system. They may add the batch date here and creation date here. Again, based on that, you put the validations. Okay. And you'll always get the time. It's better to, get the time also. Mainly if you have micro batches, if you are getting multiple files in a day, like every hourly basis, you are getting a file. So you have that kind of validation. Okay. Then other validation is check whether extension is right. If this is a CSV file, just check whether all these files are CSV. Then you are expecting a file which is compressed file in a zipped format. Then check whether it has that .gz extension, right? If you want to unzip it, check whether if it needs to be unzipped with before you proceed, right? So all these things are right, not just the validation, but some basic pre-processing that you need to do. These are all part of I'll say the pre-processing checks or pre-processing steps that you need before you process the file. So even before you ingest the data in your data lake or a warehouse, these are the processing checks. Okay. Uh, Moving to next, okay, technical validation. Now, so far we have seen the basic file level validations. Now, when it comes to technical validations, you may would like to do some technical or metadata based validations, right? Based on say data formats. Like you have a particular column which is of date format, right? And you are expecting the date to be in this, right? Form, right? DD, MM, and YYYY, right? Now, if there are any file which is, instead of that sending a record like this, right? They are sending it FEB as the month, okay, instead of 02. Then you may want to, raise an error, or you may want to cleanse the data, or you may want to, replace this by 02. Again, depending on the business use case. But whatever the technical validations are there, right? The standardizations you need to do before you load the data in your system, you can do that. Right now, some of the systems, right, who are following ELT approach, right, they may do this after loading the data into your warehouse, right? If you're using something like Redshift or Snowflake and you're following the ELT approach, what may happen that you will load the file into this your table, and then you may apply this validation. So even that is fine, okay? But check that you have these validations in place. Whatever are the error records, those get rejected, right? Only the valid records are in the target table, and all the error records, right? You get rejected, or you raise some errors for that, or you raise some warnings, right? Then you take a call based on your use case. Another example is, you are expecting like some attributes, right? You are expecting the values to be in, numbers, right? But instead of that, like you're expecting 20 as a number, but you got 20, right? Again, if that is the use case, if that is the business use case, raise an error for that. right? So look at all these technical level validations. Another are, um, data getting truncated, right? Suppose you have a fixed width column and you have the length of the column as 10, but you get a name which is, more than 10 characters, right? If that name is of 21, right? So it may happen that either the record may get rejected when you're loading it, or this name may get truncated, right? In either way, it is a problem. So check for these things, right? This is again important so that you don't lose the data. And some of the modern systems, right, they'll directly, flag these things, right? Some of the tools may flag these things directly. You don't have to put any custom code for that. So depending on your tool of choice, see what kind of validations you will have to put. I mean, validations are required. How do you implement? Depends on that. Next is the business validations, like technical validations, right? Business validations are very common. This is based on, how do you want to transform the data? How do you want to see the data in your final warehouse, right? So give an example, if the customer name is Mr. John Snow, and you get it just John Snow, but you are expecting the title, right? If this is missing, then you can flag it as an error, or there might be a condition where you default it, right? Defaulting is also very popular. It is widely used, right? Maybe this is not the right example to default it, but there might be certain cases, right? If it's a numerical field and you have not got anything, then you default it to zero, right? Something like that. So check for business validations. Another example is, it may happen that you are expecting, let's say it's a currency, right? You are expecting it in to be INR, but you or get it written as rupee in the file, and you can again reject this record. So for these cases, there might be another table where you are doing a lookup. Okay, let's say you are doing a lookup on a currency table, and you will see whether it exists. So INR is there, dollar is there, right? So you'll check, okay, this record was INR, it is present here, so this is fine. But rupee is not here, so you reject, right? So here also, either you reject it, or there can be a mapping where, the rupee is mapped to INR, and then, you get an INR from here, right? And when you put it into the target system, that record goes as INR. Okay. So these are the different kind of business validation, and these are multiple, right? There are specific tools. There are, different specialized tools for all these kind of a business validations and all, right? And there are multiple systems. Like there is things like master data management, where you have to do specific things for master data like customer and product. But yeah, these are the very basic validations we are talking about for any file ingestion. Okay, moving on, missing files, right? This is again a very important kind of a validation, missing files or duplicate files, right? We have seen the header record, or we have seen the, the file names, right? Uh, so you always know what the next file should look like, right? Let's say your 7th of Feb file, okay, add a sequence number as 0022. Okay, so your 8th of Feb, let's say it's a daily process. So your 8th of Feb file should have it as 0023. But when you get the file, suppose you get 24, that means a file is missing. So you'll get to know file is missing. So again, you have this validation in place. So for that, what you'll have to do, you'll have to store this somewhere. Okay, this sequence number, you'll have to store it in your config file, and you will say, okay, the next file expected is 23, and you'll have to do a lookup of this with this file, and then you'll have to raise a error saying that, okay, the 23 file is missing. Okay, that's how you do the validation. Now, this is being done on sequence numbers. What if there is no sequence number, right? So there might be process date. So based on process date also you can do. So if you have processed last file, you had processed was a 7th Feb, you are expecting a file of 8th Feb, but you didn't get 8th Feb file, you got the 09 file. You can raise it with the source system. Now it may happen they would say, okay, reject this file, right? Sorry, you have got the file of 09. They may say, okay, reject this file, we'll send you the 8th Feb file. Or they may say, okay, hold on with this 9th Feb file, we'll send you 8th Feb file, then you process that. Again, if there is a dependency, right, it has to be done in sequence, you'll have to wait. If there is no dependency, right, if these files which are coming right in sequence, right, but there is no dependency, you can still process your 9th Feb file, and maybe later you can do that. But this is hardly, I've never seen this, but it may happen, right? It may happen from use case to use case. But it is important to raise this error. Like missing files, it may happen you might get a duplicate file also. Okay, it may happen you get a duplicate file also. So if you have already got 022 on 7th of Feb, it may happen on 8th of Feb, you again get the same file. Okay, so you will have to raise it again that time as well. So duplicate file, missing file, all these errors, right? This has to be highlighted and it has to be sorted with the source system. And that is why you should have a very good communication channel with the source system. You should know the point of contact, right? You should have that, what do you say, the email IDs or on-call phone numbers, right? Sometimes if these are hourly batches or sometimes there are even 15 minutes batches, right? That time it is very important that these things are get sorted immediately. And see, these are not just individual systems, right? There would be multiple uh, batches or multiple workloads which depend on this. This would be the very first system, right? File ingestion is the first system in your data flow. Based on this, there would be some other processing like, where you have some DW load and there are different, things running. So there would be multiple things based on that. So ensure that, you are raising these errors quickly and getting them sorted also. Okay. And the last one, which I would like to talk about the transmission issues. Okay. So suppose you have got a file. Okay. The source has sent you a file. The file is in your system, but how do you know whether transmission is complete? Okay, let's say this is a very big file. So how do you know it is complete, right? So when you have a look at it, right, when on Unix box you do ls minus l, you'll see this. Let's say this was the size. After 5 minutes, when you again refresh, you'll see that okay, this size has changed. Okay, this has become like 32708 KB. So how do you know that, right? So for that, some of the system use method like they send another file after completion, okay, a dummy file you can say like a dot done to indicate that it is completed or a dot complete, okay, or a dot finished or a dot success, anything like that, okay. Another file, a dummy file to indicate that the previous file is complete. So it will have the same naming convention, everything is same. Instead of dot CSV, you will get as dot success, okay, which indicates that the previous file is complete. Or they might send some different alert, okay, but there should be some alerting mechanism. There should be some, and email or SNS notification. Something should be there by which you will come to know. Right now, this is important because for bigger files, right, you should know that the things are the file is completed, right? Sometimes very large files they take time, right? It may take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, right? Based on how big the file is and from where it is coming. So ensure that you have sorted out these transmission related agreements with your source system, how they are sending it. Okay. So these are all different kind of a validation. So what you do with all these things, right? What you do, you will capture all this, right? All these errors. You will either raise errors, right, for very serious issues where you cannot process, or you can raise warnings where it is okay to process, right? Some things might be a good to have kind of a thing or indicators, right? Some of the technical validations, right? So you can raise warnings, or some of them can be information also. So you will have to, raise these errors, put it into some file or put it into some other table. Okay. So this error reporting, right? Error capture, error reporting is a whole different area. Maybe we'll cover that in some of the other lectures. But you will have to capture all these things and send it back, right? Send it back to the source system. Send back to the source system so that they understand what are the issues and they can rectify them. Maybe in by reprocessing or the not reprocessing, resending the same file or from the next file onwards, right? So that whole mechanism should be established, right? You raise these errors and send it back, and the source system will, go through that and let you know, okay, what are the things to be fixed. And again, this after, after every month, right, on weekly basis or monthly basis, you can do an analysis of these errors, right? So that it will help you to understand where the problems are. Okay, there might be, right, you might be getting thousands of files in a day from different source system, or in fact from the same source system you might be getting thousands of files. So to understand, okay, there might be, some, once you start capturing this and maintaining this, let's say on weekly basis, when you see the report, you may start finding some patterns. You will understand that, right? There is a file that, that always fails on Sunday morning, right? The file that comes at Sunday morning 9 a.m., right? Let's say this is the first file of that day. This always fails due to some header issue. and you'll start finding some common patterns, right? So you'll have to understand, you will have to identify this and raise it with source system. So if there is some issue at their end, they can fix it. Okay. So this is all about, doing the validations for a file ingestion system. Go through this, think about it, and see what are the ones that you want to implement in your system. Some of the modern architectures don't really care about all these issues because it's more about populating the data lake with whatever data we get, but at least the basic validation should be there in place so that these issues are identified as soon as we receive the file, and these do not get highlighted later in the game when it is too late. Okay, so that's the reason it is important to have these kind of a validations. That's it for the day. Thanks for your time.